I've seen nothing but government corruption.
And even encouraging drug traffickers in Central America.
For the last 45 years they've been doing.
That there were strong indications of corruption.
I got shot at and forced out of LAPD because of it.
I retired from the FBI in 1979 after more than 27 years service. At the time of my retirement, I was a senior special agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles Division, with more than 700 people under my command and a budget of more than $22.5 million. And much to my surprise, my witnesses, my 19 new witnesses, including Alina Stokely, started calling me and saying, hey, Ted, the FBI has interviewed me. They're trying to get me to recant. And I had a number of other cases that I handled privately. And in each instance, I noticed evidence was lost, destroyed, stolen. I noticed that there were strong indications of corruption. But my Missing Children lecture documents that the Finders, an organization in Washington, D.C., this CIA front. It's a covert operation. They're involved in international trafficking of children. Up until about 2 years ago, I kept saying there's a loose-knit network operating in this country involving drugs, pedophilia, pornography, prostitution, corruption, etc., etc. From my research, I'm convinced it's much more serious than that. It's more than a loose-knit network. It is a conspiracy. By the way, this conspiracy involves pornography, drugs, corruption, involves pedophilia, involves organized child kidnapping rings, the Finders out of Washington, D.C., CIA cover, covert operation, involved in the international trafficking of children, terrorism, bank accounts, and the word, and it goes on.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country.
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
For the record, my name is Mike Ruppert, R-U-P-P-E-R-T. I did bring this information out 18 years ago, and I got shot at and forced out of LAPD because of it. I've been on the record for 18 years nonstop, and I'll be happy to give you, Congressman, anything that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ruppert. Number 8, use alcohol, drugs, immoral corruption, and all forms of vice to systematically corrupt the youth of the nation. I mean, I don't need to document that one. How about South Central L.A., CIA drug operations coming in there? How about Mena, Arkansas? Drugs coming into this country. Arms and munitions going out. If you don't believe me, talk to Terry Reid, talk to Chip Tatum, talk to some of these other individuals.
Well, I came to the table with a background in Air Force intelligence, 8 years during the Vietnam War, worked with the CIA and Air America, and so I know how the intelligence community functions, how it's organized, and after my discharge from the Air Force, I worked directly with the FBI's counterintelligence division for 3 years, and then that led me into contract work with the CIA in an obscure place called Mena, Arkansas, back when Bill Clinton was governor, and back when George Bush was the president. And I personally witnessed complicity between these two men, Bush and Clinton, in terms of transporting cocaine into the U.S. For the purpose of sale to generate money to fight a war. And that war at the time was the conflict in Central America involving the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. In 1970, it's well documented that the organization that was flying the classified material for Air America, codenamed Scatback, was busted. This whole fleet of airplanes and pilots was busted for hauling heroin disguised as classified material in an attempt to smuggle that back to Hawaii.
From the day I joined Task Force 160 at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, until today, I've seen nothing but government corruption. What we do has nothing to do with preserving a country's integrity. It's just business. We credit the Contras $1,500 for every kilo. That's top dollar for a kilo of cocaine down here. It's equivalent to the Americans' Kmart special, buy 4, get 1 free. On our side, we spend $1,200 for a kilo and sell it for $12,000 to $15,000. Now that's a profit center, and the market is much greater for the product than for the weapons. It's just good business sense, understand? Buddy responded with, damn. So you guys promote wars and revolution to provide weapons for drugs. We provide the non-numbered parts to change out, and we all win. Damn, that's good. Harari, the Mossad agent, said in return, it's good when it works, but someone, how do you say, has his hand in the gopher? Buddy responding on the defensive. Well, we get our 10% right off the top, and that's plenty. Goofus can make it go a long way. Harari responded to that. Who is Goofus? Governor Clinton. That's our pet word for him. You know, that's a taped conversation between Mike Harari and Buddy Young. Buddy Young was the security chief for Governor Clinton of Arkansas. As I reflect back now and think about my many years of intelligence service and the things that I had done, the missions that I had been given, and in later years working for the OSGs, I can see a very common thread, and it's a thread, and I'm not easily threatened, but it's a thread tied to a particular word, and that particular word has cropped up more and more in the most recent past by politicians. There was a politician, a senator, that was interviewing the new director of the CIA, George Tenet. She asked Mr. Tenet, are you prepared to usher in the new millennium, and are you prepared to build your Central Intelligence Agency to see to the New World Order? That was a damning statement, because I'd heard that statement in other instances. I heard that statement from statements and words pertaining to the New World Order from my handlers, from George Bush, from Bill Colby, and from Mr. Casey.
He had about a year in the CIA. I worked for him. But Bush would walk down the hall shaking hands. Hello, I'm George Bush, and I want you to know I think this is a wonderful organization, and I'm really happy to be here, and I really love working with people like you. What's your name, ma'am? You know, and it just didn't work. You know, he was campaigning right there in the halls. Now, like Gephardt at that point, he said, well, I'm against the Contras, and you'd ask about Angola, and he'd say, well, we'll have to study each part of the world. But Dukakis, his people just keep coming back and saying there will be no more Guatemalas and no more Chile. And then you say, well, what about the El Salvadorian election manipulation campaign? Will those things be outlawed as well? And they say there will be no more Chiles and no more Guatemalas. Deep concern about Central America, deep concern about the arms race, deep concern about the drug problem that's clearly dragging our nation down. Deep concern about the truth of what our country's all about and the values that this country professes. I mean, people have it laid out right in front of them that our government has been tolerating and even encouraging drug traffickers in Central America. The information was out of this linkage with George Bush, his key staffers, with Felix Rodriguez down in Ilopango, who was running the Contra air supply effort, which was, in fact, flying drugs back up into the United States. Even now, there's a possibility, if George Bush doesn't win the presidency, that he could wind up in jail.
Again, discussing Bush Sr., this man became our president.
But, you know, here's an interesting thing. And I'm only using if for the benefit of those who are uninformed about what's going on. If the CIA has actually been involved in smuggling drugs into the United States, as I know for the last 45 years they've been doing, how do you keep all these people quiet? Because it takes a lot of people. Well, the way we keep them quiet is working with the Justice Department, and anybody that threatens to expose any of this, we simply charge them with offense. Either we fabricate the charges or simply charge them for doing what we ordered them to do. And they end up in federal prison. Usually federal judges will cooperate, as I describe in my books, where federal judges will not let them bring in any of the CIA witnesses, or won't let them produce the CIA, the documents showing that they were CIA, and they end up in prison. And this, I mean, there's hundreds of people that this has happened to.
Here in Colorado, the drug war started in the 1916 or 1917. This state was run by the Ku Klux Klan. And they realized that the black people and the native Mexican people who were coming here and working for a much lesser amount of money than white people were smoking marijuana and cannabis. So what the Ku Klux Klan did was make marijuana illegal so that they can felonize blacks and Mexicans. They actually came out and said, we don't want any big-lipped niggers or brown-skinned Mexicans owning anything in Colorado. So it was an easy way for them to felonize them and to take them out of the system.
Why in the world do we have millions of innocent young people wasting away in prison when the big people who are committing these huge, atrocious crimes are getting away every day?
What's happening here in America is that our government inadvertently supplying the hard drugs to the people in this country, then they're putting the people who use them in this country in jail.
I think the prevailing view on Wall Street is anyone stupid enough to buy drugs deserves to die. And if you can make money from them while they're doing it, that's great. And if that's imposing a crime wave on a community away from Wall Street, that's okay. There's no drug crime on Wall Street.
I don't like it. They pay cash, right? They pay cash.
This is crack cocaine.
Drug prohibition for cocaine was basically passed in order to protect white women from black males. And the history will document this.
Cocaine, cocaine, cocaine.
You go to court, you're basically facing an all-white jury, a white judge, a white prosecutor, white court reporter. So it's kind of like a white world. DA agents, they're all white. I mean, in my whole case, I don't think that I've had one black person other than the probation officer in my whole case. I think that the drug war is the last white hope. When you break it all down and you look at it from the ground.
From a federal prison.
Here's the way a private prison works, okay? You pay somebody to build a fancy cage. Then you fill it up as far as you can get it, which is pretty full. Full of people that, the people that built the cage get paid $40,000 or $50,000 a year to just keep in the cage.
The ruling class here in America had to come up with something so that they could control certain segments of society so that they could stay in power. So they created the drug war for the felonization of Americans.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I worked South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. Corporations like Wackenhut, they just changed their name, Corrections Corporation of America, that house prisoners, nonviolent drug offenders. As a matter of fact, I think 60% of the increase in prison population under Bill Clinton, which was like 1 million people, of the 60% of that new prison population are nonviolent drug offenders.
Now, if you've got 5,000 people in your cage and you're being paid $30,000, $40,000 a year for them, that's a lot of money. And if you can, on top of that, use them as your private property, as chattel property, that you can then make do work or produce things that you get paid for on top of that. What a great deal. Now, where I come from, when you transform a person into a piece of property, that's called slavery.
Yeah, I sat in jail for 5 months before my lawyer came to see me. He told me, he said, only thing you can do for me, give me 25 to 99.
They trade their stock on Wall Street based upon the number of people that are in jail. If that isn't sick, if that isn't the best definition of sickness in a society, in a culture, in a civilization, I can't tell you what is.
Yeah, I know I was singled out because I was black, black guy. And the Spanish and the black, we in big, big trouble.
And you know how the news media comes after us when we use the word C, conspiracy, that C
word. Well, they'll say something like, well, this just sounds like it's some kind of conspiracy theory. Y'all hear that a lot? Okay. But tell me this, what's the difference between a conspiracy and a strategy?